Hello again, everyone. It's your favorite scruffy-looking scoundrel, the Crazy Carillion Solo Straight. Back today with my Hondo Ohnaka Pirate King speculation requirement video. So basically, I've been working on this for a few days, like shortly after they announced Pirate King Hondo Ohnaka will be coming to the game. Obviously, he's a personal favorite of mine. I thought I would go ahead and do a speculation video on what you may or may not need to be working on. Now, to that point, obviously, as said before in other videos, I don't work for CG. I don't have any inside knowledge. This is just a speculation. This is just based on general overall in-game knowledge and lore events as they tie to Hondo. So take it with a grain of salt. I mean, everyone's got their lists. Everyone's playing, you know, SWGoH bingo at this point. So let's see if we can come out on top, get some of these things knocked out early. So I've done a lot of analysis. Every GL released over the history of the game, even though they haven't came at the same time in terms of pairs, there's usually a counter to the last Galactic Legend. So if you take that for what it is, in theory, Hondo will be going to be matched up with the latest requirements for what GLAT was, or Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano. And so, generalities, though, if you look at every Galactic Legend, and I've listed out their requirements here, every Galactic Legend so far has seemed to require at least one journey guide character. Galactic Legend Ahsoka required gas, right? So, looking at that, there's going to be a journey guide requirement for Hondo. That's not the only preceding thing that stands out. Other things, other than, of course, for Leia, everyone has required a ship. With Leia not even having a ship, one could say maybe there's no ship required. However, being that this is a pirate coming into the game, obviously there's going to be a ship. And then we saw that trend with Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano having her starfighter required. So we're going to have a ship in there as well, currently one that's already in the game. So we do have a ship listed. Other things that stand out, of course, the marquees. Now, everyone's had marquees, and everyone has had the same number in terms of being pairs for the most part. Ahsoka had 6. Now, if you look at the announcement for Galactic Legend Hondo, of course, there are 6 pirates coming to the game. So let's just go ahead and say that that's going to be the equivalent there. All 6 pirates coming will be needed. So what you're really tuning in for right here is what are we going to need in addition to the marquees. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and dive into our Hondo speculation. So some of my thoughts, right? Some of my thoughts going into this was looking at, of course, we got the new Spectre tag with Ahsoka, and now we're getting a pirate tag. With Ahsoka, 3 of the 6 marquees actually required or came out with the Spectre tag. Whereas the pirate tag, we already know is going to be associated to the 6 new marquees. And in the case of Ahsoka, 2 in-game characters got the Spectre tag as well. And that was Fulcrum and Chopper. Of those, Fulcrum was needed, Chopper was not. So you could say, well, maybe if you mirror that up right now, in-game, 2 characters did receive the pirate tag in-game. And that's, of course, Impy's Nest and Sana Starros. They've actually put in the game the first 4 requirements. So with that, my original speculations actually, one was proven. I did say that we would need Ezra at the time. I did think Ezra was going to be a higher relic 7. He is required at relic 6. So again, however, they did throw that surprise in there of veteran smuggler Chewbacca. There is a tie there. For those of you that have been to Black Spire Outpost on Batuu. There's a kind of a sequence story there of where Hondo borrows the Falcon from Chewbacca. After, you know, doing his smuggling escapade or whatever, he ends up giving it back to Chewie, and him and Chewie kind of form like a bond, alliance sort of thing, where he can borrow the Falcon from time to time to do various things. So if you look at it collectively, every GL has required a self, and the self is usually high relic. So going back to Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano, she was required at Relic 9, every version of herself. So Hondo at Relic 9, no surprises there. Like I said, Ezra, huge ties there. If you have watched Rebels at all, you know Ezra and Hondo share a very kindred friendship of Hondo basically using Ezra a lot. And so Ezra I thought would be Relic 7. They required him at Relic 6. So no surprises there. And then what are you going to need in relation to everything else? So looking at it like I've stated already, every Galactic Legend has required a journey guide character, with Ahsoka's being Gas. And then there was actually a character in Ahsoka's requirements that was a requirement for Gas that has a tie to Ahsoka, and that was Ventress, right? And so we're going to mirror that. We're going to say that that is going to be another thing proven out here. We're going to say Dr. Afra. Now, a lot of you might be like, what has Dr. Afra got to do with Hondo Ohnaka? So in the comics, Dr. Afra, of course, and Hondo are both after the same thing. They're both searching for the sword of Kashan. And in order to go find it, Hondo actually arranges for Dr. Afra to have passage on some of his freighters. So there's a small tie there. She does check the requirement of being a journey guide character. And in the game herself, she requires Hondo to unlock, right? So, but since Hondo's already counted as self at Relic 9, you look at the other requirements, and if you look in there, you'll see Sana Staros. Obviously, you have to take her pilot relics. So I'm going to say Sana Staros in there at Relic 7. Or since Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano needed a conquest character in Cat, the first initial thought and what jumps out is, oh, well, we'll need a conquest character. There's only going to be one in terms of being able to launch here, and that's going to be Smee, who's going to be unlocked in a few weeks. But I thought about it, and I thought about it, and I said, I really don't want to put a conquest character in there. I really don't want to say Smee is going to be required because it's too new. Not a lot of people is going to have them at unlock, and the goal is for them to make a GL hard to get, but hard to get that has monetary value. So if you haven't already, prior to the conquest coming up, spent or at a position to unlock Smee, I don't think that they're going to make them a requirement because you can't go back and get them at this point. If you missed shards, you didn't red crate, gold crate, whatever in the past, it's going to be really hard to get them unlocked this cycle unless they release some kind of pack, which I don't think they're going to do. So, and obviously he's not in Proving Grounds yet, so you can't just spend money that way. So looking at it, I said, well, why was Cat the conquest character? And then I thought about it and says, instead of counting Snips, or instead of counting Fulcrum as the Relic 9 self requirement, we go with Cat is the Relic 9 self requirement. And so that matches up then to say Hondo at Relic 9 as a self, which means we now have that open space of what was Snips and what was Fulcrum. So matching that back up, you look at it, Fulcrum is currently in the game. Fulcrum is useful. A lot of people had Fulcrum, but Fulcrum didn't really have a set team and doesn't have any other requirements. There's nothing that has required Fulcrum prior. So when you look at that, I'm going to go ahead and counter and say that there's going to be a useful toon in the game currently that doesn't really have a set home, that can be by themselves character or work in some teams, right? And then the idea that Fulcrum has an Omicron, so I matched that up to who fits that criteria. Has an Omicron, works by themselves, but can be part of a team, and has a tie to Hondo Ohnaka. And so for that, I'm going to say SWGoH Press. Now, you might be like, well, what's the tie there? So, in the lore, if you remember in Clone Wars, pirate forces of Ohnaka, and they end up interacting with, of course, the Night Brothers, Darth Maul, and SWGoH Press. And in that battle, SWGoH actually ends up losing his arm. So we're going to go with SWGoH. The next set of requirements, you had Rex in there. We all know Rex has huge ties to Ahsoka Tano. So you have to match that up to another character from Hondo's past that has some ties and interaction. And so for that, I'm going to go with Cad Bane. Anyone who has seen Rebels or any of the other shows knows that there's some ties there between Hondo and Cad. So I just feel like Cad Bane's going to be in there. So then moving along, the next set of requirements, Ahsoka Tano had Barriss Offee. Now, a lot of people know the history there. Barriss Offee and Ahsoka, they were kind of like sisters, Jedi Order, but Barriss became to not believe what the Jedi were doing, and so framed Ahsoka, and there's a whole spill there, and Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order. So when you look at that, I'm trying to think what character in the game currently has some kind of tie to Hondo that maybe some people have, maybe some people don't, but if they have them, they're generally not at high relics. And so, looking at it, I decided to go with Ognot here. Now, I know a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I think Ognot's going to be required for Hondo, at least at Relic 5, but with CG, you never know. They might take this thing up to Relic 8, because that's the monetary opportunity they have to make some money. A lot of people don't have Ognot, of course, Relic, let alone Relic 8. As you can see, it's one of the lower characters based on the data points currently in the game. And so you might be like, well, why Ognot? Well, anyone that knows Hondo's story knows that he had an Ognot working with him a lot named Melch. Now, of course, Melch was very loyal. Comic relief from time to time. Hondo, of course, did what Hondo does. Always took advantage of the situation there. Left Melch kind of high and dry a few times. But since Melch is coming to the game, you kind of say, well, what loose tie? How can we get a Melch-like thing? And so kind of like, you know, the idea that Jabba had a Tusken Raider and a Jawa, right, because they were from the same planet. We're just going to go ahead and say Ognot because Melch was an Ognot. So Ognot. Relic 5, maybe up to Relic 8, just depends on how much that CG wants to throw out there. So at that point, we now have a couple more characters here. There ain't much left to go off here other than the ship now. And one more character I haven't named. So they kind of tie together in the same story, so that's why we're doing it this way. If you look at the Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano requirements, Plo Koon is in there at Relic 8. Plo Koon, of course, found Ahsoka, turned her over to the Jedi Order, and then she eventually becomes Gas's Padawan. And so you have to look at what kind of tie is there like that for Hondo Ohnaka already in the game, and that's Aurra Sing. So for those of you that don't know the lore, Aurra Sing and Hondo actually were a couple. Of course, had a falling out because Hondo is Hondo. And so one of the last missions that they worked on together in the Clone Wars stories was they had to do a bounty. And of course, part of that bounty ended up with them Aurra stealing Slave 1. And then at the end of that arc, Hondo and Aurra returned Slave 1 to a very young Boba Fett. So going with that, we're going to say Aurra Sing definitely going to be required. Definitely going to be at least Relic 8. Match up with that Plo Koon requirement for Ahsoka Tano. And then the ship itself, obviously, same arc, same storyline. Going to be Slave 1. Now I know Slave 1 is needed, of course, for various other things, Executor. But we've seen double up in the past. And if they go the same route, it'll be a ship in the game tied to the character. And there's no real other ship that you could say currently in game has any ties to Hondo Ohnaka. So, recap, right? Version of self, Hondo Ohnaka marries with Cat, Relic 9. Journey Guide character, we had General Skywalker, Relic 8, so we'll have Dr. Afra. We had Asajj Ventress was needed for Ahsoka Tano, who's part of the Journey Guide for General Skywalker, so we'll get Sana Starros, same thing, needed for Afra, she'll be Relic 7. Looking at, you know, filler, if you will, Snips was in there, she's a version of Ahsoka Tano. I'm going to go ahead and just say that marries up the veteran, you know, Smuggler Chewie, just because it's kind of a filler. I don't know what else to call that category for my speculations to work out. Ezra Bridger in the game, higher relics, huge ties to Hondo. The useful Omnicron character, Fulcrum, with ties, SWGoH. In-game character that has a team and a home already. We're going to match that up and say Cad Bane. He already has uses in the game. He's not going to be a pirate. So he has something to do, but he has ties to Hondo. Character in the game that is attached to the lore of this character. Barasafi for Ahsoka Tano. We're going to say Ognot, Melch. Ognot for Hondo. And then marquees, of course, you've got the 6, you've got Vane, Silbo, Kix, Brutus, Athano, Qui-Gon. And then the in-game character that attaches to the lore with the highest relics, we had Plo Koon at 8 for Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano. So we're going to see Orsing, or, Hondo's girlfriend for a time, relic 8. And then the in-game ship, of course, Slave 1, from where Aura took it, crashed it, and they ended up giving the Slave 1 to a young Boba in homage of Jango. So that's pretty much where we're at. So again, let me know if you liked it or not. Comment, subscribe, let me know what kind of stuff you want to see. And remember, in your SWGoH journey, you don't have to go alone, but you might want to go solo.